Hello, I think they look muted.
Oh,
Okay.
mm, yeah, they can unmute themselves. Hello.
Hello.
Okay. Hello. How are you doing today? This is Paul. I haven't talked with Paul in a while. How's it going? You have to unmute yourself to speak. Oh, hi.
Hi. Let's just
Hi.
wait a little bit for other people to join in.
What time is it where you are, Anne? Oh my goodness. Wow. Ouch. Sorry, this was kind of optimized for the US. Whoops. So, thanks for are you normally a night owl or are you being
No,
especially
I already
nice?
slept. I slept
Oh,
with
okay.
my alarm clock.
It was super early bird today.
Hello.
Hello. So people are trickling in.
I'm gonna turn off my camera. My connection is getting a bit
It's
messed up.
a little bit sketchy. Yeah. Sometimes we just had a typhoon roll through our part of the world, so some things are still a little bit unbalanced. Hey, Paul.
Yeah.
I can
Hey, how you doing?
pretty good. How are things?
Good.
So, well, this is if there's we could go ahead and start with questions. I'm going to record this and I'll make like a clip out thing and we can put it up on like YouTube later.
Okay.
So, so I'm not sure if anybody's followed. I've been streaming some coding sessions lately. I'll be doing more of that. I'll probably do one after this actually, just to explain what I've been up to this week. Um, Working on Gaju Express and doing Gaju Express has kind of exposed a bunch of new things. Hello. Ah, okay. So I think everybody might be muted by default, and you might have to unmute yourself to speak.
No, I turned off that setting for now.
Oh, you did. Okay.
Yeah.
So, all right. Yeah. So, uh, yeah. Well, we could let them
So,
unmute
Craig,
themselves. Yes, sir.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
So, how's the feedback on the testing going and just what's been rolled out recently?
Um, Actually, positive so far, and we're getting good, some good suggestions. One was just having like, I hate dark mode. Can you have a light mode too? That type of thing, and we certainly can do stuff like that. But those are, yeah, I mean, that's trivial, but it's a user experience thing, and it does matter, right? So, okay, yeah, so good. Thank you for reminding me because I usually do everything in dark mode. Um, uh, so that like that type of stuff's been good. And the fact that we're at a point now where um, for the first time ever in blockchain, I think it's within 3 minutes you can go from having nothing on your computer about blockchain stuff at all to writing a contract and deploying it on chain and hitting contract calls to it. That's a huge step change in development pace for blockchain stuff. So the advantage that the um, like the kind of crypto consultancies, the way that they work is they make sure everything's impossibly hard to do, so you have to hire a consultancy. Breaking that barrier, it does expose a few risks because people can just shoot off contract calls from Gaju Desk now, right? So anybody can just like spam any contract. So you have to have a well written contract. That wasn't the case so much before in other chains, but ours is really easy to use. So that has led to us being able to very quickly identify things like Gajo Express that's like obviously a good idea. No one's done it, so we're doing that. In the course of what I'll be talking about on my stream in a little bit, actually, is um, in the course of developing Gajo Express, I'm like, how can I actually make sure that the sender and receiver are truly confidential? Um, because DNS can be poisoned. The TLS certificate authority scheme that we use for HTTPS everywhere, that's all compromisable if you're sufficiently well connected into the system. How do we really guarantee those things? That's led to this whole separate set of revelations that I'm pursuing right now. So we have a good, like if you solve the shared ledger problem, the notary problem, you solve the notary problem for like a whole category of other problems that the internet has as a whole. And the handful of people that I've discussed that with a little bit in depth, they've been really excited about this idea. We're trying to figure out how to kind of package it up and genericize it for kind of a use everywhere. So anyway, that just the fact that stuff is like, we kind of gotten out of the hole. Separately also, I've gotten some feedback on, we have payments finally working on gajumining.com and they're reliable now. So people can buy stuff with a credit card. They couldn't do that reliably before because we had that payment processing thing was the biggest, like we thought that was going to be a non-issue. We were wrong. That was like the biggest landmine we ever stepped on, and it's finally solved. So finally we can do what we had intended to do, was try to fund as much as possible through, direct sales instead of just investment and so on. So that's been positive. Feedback on the reward system. That's been so this is good. I think it's nice to get out of the gloomy narratives of the past and kind of get into the hopeful space where like, oh, things, you can do a thing now. Yay. So that's been really good. So I don't know that can they unmute themselves or not?
Yeah, they can.
Oh, okay. Cool.
You guys can ask questions. Go ahead.
I can go ahead if no one else wants to.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
Thank you for doing this AMA, by the way.
Sure.
So what I often run into is that when I introduce the Gajumaru to people, they ask the question, if decentralization is that important, why do you have to pay to mine at this stage? Because to make it more accessible, the train of thought is, okay, then it has to be there shouldn't be a monetary step to go through in order to mine. Sorry, it was a little bit of a weird question, but
yeah, sure.
I understand.
Sure. So that's a really good question. The reason for that is, well, there's a stack of reasons that result in this as a solution. So we have a basic problem, which is that trying to explain a novel blockchain proposition to people is quite difficult. And so getting investment is very difficult. So to complete the core definition of Groot, we have the definition to finish implementing the core definition of Groot. We need funding for just like basic stuff, salary and keep the lights on. It's not a ton of money, but it's not peanuts either. So we need funding, and it's probably not going to just come from investors out of nowhere. So revenue, basically, that's one, but that's an early thing. The second problem is that if you run a truly decentralized proof of work system, what you wind up with is immediately you have all these mining projects that know that the Bitcoin halving problem is extremely severe and it's brutal. And if the price of Bitcoin's like declining, so you have the cost of mining to the amount of effort that you output to get one Bitcoin is increasing drastically. At the same time, the price of Bitcoin is declining, and at some point they intersect and you go, mining's not profitable. This sucks. Well, they've got warehouses of computers, right? Warehouses of them. How's your graphics card going to compete against a warehouse of computers? So the problem is that you wind up with a case where one mega miner is going to show up and just like consume the whole network and every Gaju belongs to them. Now you have a problem that you don't have Gajus distributed amongst a bunch of people. You have Gajus all in one spot, and that's not a currency. So what we're aiming for is we would rather have a ton of small scale miners to start with. That's the reason that there's caps. And if we charge for access to the early pool when the getting's good, like right now, we're not even in resource contention yet or reward contention yet. So if you you can, right, for the moment, the getting's really good in mining. So if you do get a mining license and you participate basically at all, you're going to hit your cap every day because we're not in contention yet. Once we do have enough miners that we do have contention, well, now it's actually a power, it's a competition for real. But there's still no incentive to try to mine beyond your cap every day, which prevents that single gorilla coming in and taking everything over. So the goal is to get enough miners that are diffuse enough so that we have a lot of distribution of rewards. So meaning lots of Gajus are in lots of different wallets all over the place instead of just one mega wallet somewhere. That's actually the goal. So once that happens, then we just get rid of the whitelist, stop doing mining sales, and then it's a free for all. It's a genuine free for all. But early participation during this kind of weird period where the mining rewards are especially juicy, participation is extremely cheap for early adopters. Yeah, so and we need funding to finish the project. That's the confluence of reasons why we chose to go this route with a whitelist mining that you pay for a seat in the whitelist. Now I said we're not in reward contention yet. That means there's excess reward going somewhere. What's happening with that excess reward is that the hive leader keeps the excess reward that's not assigned, that's not distributed, and that reward is being put into a stability fund. Because what's going to happen at some point is we're going to hit a point where, okay, Gaju Express, how do I use that? Well, you get a little mining license and you can pretty much securely send documents forever. Well, law firms, a lot of people are interested in doing that. It turns out that's a huge case for law firms. Didn't realize that was going to be the way it is, but they're really interested in that because they have to guarantee confidentiality and they can't actually right now. And you certainly can't do it by zipping a thing up and putting it on Google Drive and just sending it to somebody and pretending it was safe. So that's a major pain point that they've got, and that occurs in a bunch of different industries that have confidentiality requirements. It also happens across engineering companies. It turns out if you leak anything about a project that you're developing right now, when you transfer files from point to point, if you can't prove that you protected those in some secure way, then your patent application later on is invalid. So stuff like that. So there actually is a big need for genuine confidentiality and end-to-end encryption of transferred files, and they might be quite large. So we can charge, but we charge for that in Gajus. So how do you get Gajus? Go get a mining license. You're good. You're set for as long as your company needs to do this. So that's one use case. Capillary. Capillary is a very fast micropayments thing, so you can charge sub-cent amounts, which like a credit card charge costs like $3 to process. We want to charge a sub-cent amount. Obviously, these don't match, right? So if you are like an AI service provider and you want OpenClaw to be able to just zip, like fire off requests that are charged in token, they're accounted for in tokens. The puck is such a small granular size that within Capillary we can charge per token even. Like they can make the charges that small if they want to, and those can happen thousands of times a second. So okay, cool. Well, I want to have my OpenClaw talk to this AI provider, and I want to do it over Capillary because it's a really granular way that I can back out of. I don't have to buy a $10,000 contract up front and then only use 500 of it, and then I never get a refund. That's the problem that you have in AI right now. So we can solve that problem too. So how do you do that? Get a mining license, you're set, right? That narrative of get a mining license, you're set. Get a mining license, you're set. That's a decent appeal for early adoption. At some point, though, you get to this place where, okay, well, if I'm a big company and I have my guys using AI all the time and it's being paid over Capillary, the bonus to them that would have been their token allowance just becomes a Gaju allowance. So I want my company to have this. Well, now I also want there to be a secondary market in this, and so I'm going to pressure an existing exchange to adopt the Gaju without the Gajumaru project even talking to them, because that can happen. When that crossover happens, that's when all hell breaks loose. Because if the Gaju is useful in a practical sense, and it's priced in a secondary market that's priced in fiat on an exchange somewhere, now we're going to have rabid, crazy speculators wanting to buy up every Gaju and run the number up and be crazy about it, right? Now, at that moment, it actually starts being hard to price things in Gajus because the Gaju price is going, right? So the point of the stability fund that's being kind of aggregated by the hive until we hit reward contention, the point of that is to hand that off to a broker and say, use this as a shock absorber until it runs out. So try to keep the Gaju at a fixed price until that runs out, and then you can't do anything. You can't stand in front of a market. You'll get run over. That's just how it is. But we can try to provide a shock absorber for a little bit that will at least allow the utility that you could price a utility in terms of Gajus without it being totally nuts day to day. That's the point of that stability fund. But beyond that, we can't do anything about it. The price will just do whatever it does. It will likely, like right now, if you look at an easy way to kind of think about the scale of the price of the Gaju right now is to think of it as about 1 penny or about 1 yen, because that's roughly what it works out to if you look at the end of the mining whitelist period versus how much it costs to get into the whitelist for mining. What's your reward kind of tally up to? It's about 1 yen. So I'm fully comfortable putting so the Gaju market, I'm about to put that up publicly. When I get I need to solve the chain sync problem. If someone directly calls a contract on chain without going through the interface, Gaju market won't know about it, but the chain will. I have to fix that problem so the chain can actively tell the back end to update. Once I fix that problem, I'm going to put Gaju market up publicly. We have test.gaju market, test.gaju.market is up right now, but I want to put a little bit nicer version of it up pretty soon. Because I know that 1 Gaju, the price of cost of mining 1 Gaju is about 1 yen, I feel totally comfortable putting stuff up for sale there personally, priced in Gajus at the yen price that I buy stuff at the store here normally. So that's a very easy mental model for that. The problem is, I mean, it's a good thing in terms of we who hold Gajus will be happy when the price goes up, right? When the value of the Gaju increases. But you can get a market paralysis problem where the reason the Gaju is skyrocketing is because number go up, people are chasing it. At the same time, you're trying to price practical utility stuff in Gajus just as normal money. And it makes it very hard to start accounting for the price of those services. So that's why we want to kind of use that whitelist excess as a shock absorber. But like I said, eventually it's going to be gone at some point. And that's just how things go. The hope, and this is hope, is that at the end of that kind of rabid phase, when the stability fund runs out, that we've got something approaching a typical sort of history of how the price fluctuates over time, and people can at least reason about how much should I put this t-shirt up for sale on Gaju market mentally. It cost me $10. How much should I put it, in fiat it costs $10. Well, how much should I put it up for on Gaju market? What's a fair price? That hopefully that will be not an impossible mental calculation. So anyway, all that together is kind of why we've done this whitelist mining, but it's just a phase. We can't Groot itself does not have governance by design. When we let go of the whitelist, it's the Wild West, and we can't even update Groot beyond that. So that's why we have to get the definition as it stands implemented fully in Groot. And beyond that, new chain innovations, new consensus models, new protocol additions, and so on, that will still occur, but it will happen on associate chains. And there will be many, many, many more associate chains than there ever are Groot. Groot's just
Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, no, thank you for your answer. That was very clarifying. And actually, the stability fund was one of my questions as well, because it does introduce centralization, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Temporarily, yes.
Yeah, and I think then it comes down to trust again.
Mm-hmm.
To that, whoever you outsource the stability fund to, or that management to, is a trustworthy party. And Yeah, that's where I also run into discussions when I present Gajumaru to other people, because it is, yeah, it is a weak point in the.
Well, so the trust function there, I trust them to be as devious and conniving and horrible as possible. That is so dumping a bunch of, so they know that if they dump all at once, they're going to flatten the price. That's bad for them. So they have an incentive to, they kind of get a freebie if they play it wisely. And that gives us a shock absorber. If they're dumb and try to dump on the market, then they kill the market too, and that's bad for them. So I'm trusting the greed incentive to actually help that. Now, there's plenty of dumb, irrational people around. Just how it is. So instead of handing it off all to one party, we would be trying to kind of spread this out a bit. So, but
I never thought about it that way.
yeah, well, you have to. People are really smart when it comes to being devious, and then they're really dumb when it comes to being altruistic. So it's kind of better to bet on the devious side, and that's fine. It's just kind of, I mean, that's how like mining is structured too, right? There's an incentive structure underlying this. That's also why we don't have permanent burns. After 20 years of inactivity, a wallet will get reaped and put back. It doesn't get burned. It gets put back into the mining pool to be mined out again, and that resets the mining curve ratchet, right? It resets it a little bit, like how many remain to be mined. That's so if you burn to the zero account, which is like designated as a burn account, that is actually the to be mined Gaju's pool, and the Gajus in circulation and the Gajus in zero account, they have to balance out to that max 1 trillion. So even there, we're not going to completely kill the mining incentive in terms of mining like block reward. That will always exist at some low level because there's always going to be stuff being churned back out. But the goal with Groot is that probably over time, like right now, Gaji Market runs on Groot, Gaji Express runs on Groot, and so on. If Groot starts to hit mempool saturation, which at some point it will, you'd see services like that moving to associate chains, which is fine because Groot, really the purpose of Groot is to maintain the money supply and to protect the money supply. At some point, you have the associate, the inter-associate chain routes. So I'm on Japan chain. Japan has its own jurisdictional rules and whatever. We can tailor Japan chain for that. New Zealand chain has its own rules. I'm going to go on tour to New Zealand. Well, I just send myself money on that chain, and it has to go through Groot, right? That interchain will eventually be the main function of Groot, and services will probably move to the associate chains over time. But that, again, has to be like a greed-driven kind of price incentive. Why does it cost so much to do a transaction on Groot? Well, it's because the mempool would be saturated otherwise, and so on. You have to let the market find these things. Like, that's what, when you hear the term the market function, that's what the market function is. Nobody in the world knows what the price of anything is actually. You put a price out and people say yes or no. It has to be free will based, and free will is often greedy. So you have to leverage that. So anyway, back to your point. Yes, there's kind of a trust function, and my hope is that they would try to play this to their long-term benefit as opposed to short-term kind of dumb benefit. And there's going to be some short-sighted silly people that wind up, in the stability fund operation probably, and they're going to screw themselves over, and that's fine. But as long as they all don't do that at the same time, then this will be fine.
Okay, but the assumption is then that this stability fund, whoever manages it, is they will go for profit maximization, and not because they could be a party to who ends up using it for nefarious purposes, and because if you have a disproportionate part of the gadgets in circulation at this early stage,
Mm-hmm.
and you have bad intentions, then you have like a it gives a lot of power to one party.
Right, yeah. So I don't want all eggs in one basket as much as possible. Eggs all in one basket's bad, especially for a currency too. Remember, we've got this problem where if all the gadgets are in one spot, no matter where that spot is, it's not current. and that makes it not a currency. So Gajus, having X amount of Gajus when the Gaju is a genuine currency gives you utility power and has the Gaju's got somewhere to go. If you have 90% of the Gajus yourself and everybody else is scrambling over the 10% circulation, that's not a currency, and people are going to identify that as like a weird situation. So you want to, again, it goes to smooth distribution, and one of the long-term goals is to kind of get back to the model where, because nobody has a money printer, people have to think in terms of cash flows instead of just like, oh, I'm going to retire early. Like a couple of people are going to retire early, right? But everybody can't retire at the same time, because then nobody's making anything. And if nobody makes things, we're going to run out of things. And that's kind of silly. So you want to encourage actual productive activity instead of just moving things around in spreadsheets and sitting around and like talking about how you're on a boat. So we want to encourage positive activity. And that means not putting everything in, not rigging the game for one party. That's really, really poisonous. That's why the central bankers, which is really weird, like central banks are the enemy. Weirdly enough, at conferences, the people that have agreed with us are the central bankers, because they're like held hostage by like control freak politicians. And they're like, please don't make us do this. And they see this as sort of a way to sneak in a thing where they get to say, oh, we've got a digital currency now. We've satisfied the CBDC requirement that's been put down on us by the lawmakers. But this is one that locks us into this thing where our digitized version of our fiat currency sits next to this thing that's a proof of work currency. And now it's transparent what the values are. So it kind of limits the skullduggery you can get up to on the fiat side. And they like that idea because there has to be constraints in the system, or else you kill your economy overall. And they do know that. They don't want to screw their own economy. No, it's kind of like you see people get in charge of a project and start doing crazy things. They usually don't understand the destruction that they're bringing, because most people don't want to preside over the decline and demise of their own project, right? So it's like this confluence of perverse incentives that causes these weird things to happen. And the central bankers are well aware of that, being economists, and they actually don't like a lot of, like, we're going to have colors of money, and the money will like evaporate after a certain number of days, and we can like pick if this guy can go to 7-Eleven or not, and because we don't like that one, he said something bad on Twitter. Like, they don't like that stuff because they're like, this is going to kill the economy, because it paralyzes people to make decisions. So in economic planning, the greatest fear, or the greatest poison you can put into an economy, is uncertainty. Because now nobody knows, like, if I put the money into building a factory, that's going to, like, I put the money out today and I get the factory like next year. That's a long period. In that interim, what's the factory for? It's for making batteries. Is it going to be illegal due to like wacko environmental regulations? Is it going to be illegal to build batteries next year? Well, if you don't know the answer to that, you just don't build a factory, and now nobody has batteries. Congratulations, right? That's what uncertainty does. So you cannot plan going forward if you're just living in permanent uncertainty. And that is the poison that it messes everything up. So
I think someone has a question. Sorry.
Yeah, it looks like
I'm taking a long time. Sorry.
Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Yeah.
Okay, nice. Yeah, I didn't want to interrupt you.
Sorry about that.
I don't know when exactly to
Thank you,
interrupt you
Frank.
to answer questions. So I have quite a few questions, but I went over them and I saw that some of them actually I already know the answer to. But one thing that I would like to understand is, how does the communication between the associate chains work? How exactly are we gonna interact with that? For example, if I want to do something on associate chain Japan, do I have to log into that one? Do I have to connect to that associate chain? Is my wallet gonna do that for me, or do I have to toggle in between them? I don't know if you know the blockchain called Cadena. They had like proof of work with 20 parallel working chains, and you had to like choose which chain you want to actually send money to, stuff like that. You have to toggle the chain. So I was wondering if we're gonna have so many associate chains and they're all gonna be connected to Groot, how are they gonna be connected in between them?
Okay, yeah, that's a good question. So, um, so chains, interchain communication is specifically over currency amounts. So that's kind of square one. You can't transfer contracts between chains. You could, because that's just a copy, and you can't prove that the copy was destroyed in the original place. So if I have like an NFT, for example, on chain A and I move to chain B, well, chain A still got a copy of it. How do I know that that's been removed? Which one is the canonical copy? So you say, no, this copy at, it's like your email address, this username at what domain, right? Well, this thing, this address at that chain is that thing. That's its total, its fully resolved address. Similarly, contracts are account IDs, just like your account ID is. There's actually the same underneath. Contracts are like an account with some more stuff added to it, some transition logic. So the way that communication works between like Groot and another chain is that you can send money to yourself on that other chain. You cannot send money to somebody else's account on a different chain directly. The transfer goes from you to you across chains. And the reason for that is that you signed it, and so this chain can verify that that was your intention. The second step of that is that account IDs are all self-referential because they're public keys. So your ID on Groot is your same ID on every other chain, and they all understand it. Because the moment that an account is created on a chain is when it's first referenced. So it's very natural to just send money from yourself to yourself on another chain. At that moment, that account pops into existence over there, and it can verify your intention to have sent money to yourself. So that's why.
Will we have to do something for that, or will this all be automated?
It'll be automated inside the wallet. So the wallet has a chain crawling function. There's two different ways chains are connected internally. They're both very similar. We have a thing called a gossip protocol. So inside of Groot, for example, there's a bunch of different nodes, and when they start out their life, they've got the public key and the address of a couple. And so they start out, they're not synced. They start out and they're like, oh, I'll reach out and see if I can connect to these guys. They connect to them. If their public keys check out and the addresses check out, they go, oh, so I'm part of Groot now. And then it asks, what are your peers? And it gets a peer list of similar address and public key, and it tries to reach out to them, and it gets worked into their peer list and so on. So you get this mesh connection that's kind of amorphous and it changes all the time. And it's just a peer network doing peer network things. That's within one chain. That's within Groot. There's a second layer of this called the global gossip. And that is every Gajumaru node within mainnet will reach out and try to find other peers across different chains across the whole world. Now, when it first connects, it knows it's trying to find an address for a node that carries a specific chain that's part of a specific other chain. What travels across that global mesh is those interchain messages. So in the inside of Groot, inside of one chain, all the transactions go across the mempool communication happens across them. The height, all that stuff travels within the mesh. That's the blockchain you're familiar with. That's how that always works. The global mesh, that's where interchain messages go. And if they're not relevant to a given node, they just pass it on to their peers. So pretty quickly, all messages get everywhere all at once. Those messages only occur once per generation. So every 2 minutes, you get this blast of interchain messages that go out, and they get processed and pushed into whatever the next generation is. So there's a global height. Groot acts as a global clock because it's proof of work. We don't have to have a centralized clock. So when Groot reaches a new height, any interchain transfers that are pending get rolled up into a big transaction, put out on the global mesh that goes out to everybody, whichever chain that's relevant for. It gets picked up into their internal mesh and pushed around, and the new leader then includes those on the chain, and that's the state update for that. So inside of one chain, transactions are immediate. The latency is like 3 seconds, right? Within the global mesh, the latency is 2 minutes. And finality across the global mesh is up to 4 minutes, because you might have just like submitted a transaction, it didn't make it into the roll up, and you got to wait another 2 minutes. So globally, you could have up to 4 minutes latency for interchain transactions or transfers. I said that interchain transfers are currencies only. When I say currency, the Gaju is the main currency that every chain carries, because Groot is the chain that every chain is an associate of, so they all follow its global height. But an associate chain can also declare its own currency if they want to. So you could make, the purpose for that is like, if the Bank of Japan wants to make a digitized yen, and because they want to maybe do smart contracts denominated directly in yen. A tokenized yen would be horrible, because contract calls are expensive and it's silly, and spends are expensive and it's just dumb. So instead, they can make a native yen that's native to Japan chain, and it sits next to the Gaju. So when you make contract calls or spends or whatever, you declare which currency it's in. That just becomes a toggle. Like, I'm going to send this much digital yen, or I'm going to send this many Gajus. When I write a smart contract, the amount in this contract, this is a yen contract or a Gaju contract. So you can pick whichever one. So we have Japan chain over here. Now let's say we have Taiwan chain. Maybe Taiwan chain wants to do a Taiwan dollar, and they want to participate directly in the digital Japanese yen and the Gaju. So we have Groot, we have Japan chain, and we have Taiwan chain. Each one of these currencies has what's called a financial authority. Groot is the financial authority for the Gaju. It's the only chain allowed to mint or destroy Gajus. Japan chain, the Central Bank of Japan, their chain, is the financial authority for the digital yen. They get to make the rules up about the digital yen, which means that you could do things like have an ATM where you put your cash yen in and it's immediately a digital yen under their rules.
But
Groot never sees these.
if they can make their own rules, doesn't that like make the danger of having, printing yen out of nothing, basically? Who is gonna
Yeah,
say?
because that's why it's fiat. Yeah, of course. Of course.
So technically, they could abuse it like that. I don't know how to
They
say
do
that.
today.
On other blockchains, yeah. But
Yeah,
the
you
whole
think
point
I'm going to
about
be able
Gajumaru
to?
is that
You
it's not
think I'm?
possible to do this here.
No. This is that the technology underlying Gajumaru is useful in the context of fiat as well. But what we can do is make that fiat sit next to a currency that cannot be debased. So they're debasing their currencies right now.
Yeah.
And they have this need they have a mandate for establishing a digital dollar, a digital euro, and so on, right? They have no way to do this because this is a dirty secret about it all. The people that are trying to implement the CBDCs, they actually don't know how anything works. They have the craziest idea. Like when you talk with them in consultation, it's like Space Dream's wish list of hope, and it's crazy. They don't know how anything works. They think that like every single subunit of a currency, like the 100th of a penny that you're going to spend, is going to have its own serial number, and they're going to look it up every time you buy a candy bar. Like, that's not reality. It's nuts. It's a control freak's fantasy. That stuff is not possible. They're already control freaks, and they already screw the pooch with deficit spending. Giving them the tools to at least use their fiat next to a currency that can't be debased, but giving their existing fiat the power of like, you can write a smart contract denominated in your existing currency. That's a pretty good pull, especially for vendors who want to be able to deal in both and smoothly transition to them. Because think about the proposition otherwise. If I said, you need to come use our system, but to do so, you have to just throw your whole economy away and only use what I made because I've got everything right the first time. That's silly. Like, no.
Yeah.
Use your existing currency, use your existing rules in your existing jurisdiction, the way that you need to have them, have the rules of consensus follow your laws, the way that they work where you are, and slowly adopt this system. So you've got your users and your vendors still spending things in yen, they're taxed in yen, they're doing things in yen. You can adopt our tool set So adopt the wallets that we use, the communication protocols that we use. You can slowly, incrementally adopt these without disrupting things massively. You can get you can make it common practice within your economy to use smart contracts for what they're good for, which is smart contract's a horrible term. It's really like ledger logic, right? It's transition logic. It's not like a contract, but for computers, it's like transition logic. Get people used to that idea in a smooth way. Now, all this is sitting right next to the Gaju. Now, from a vendor's perspective, what happens is doing this and accounting for all this in yen is easy because that's how everything is set. The next phase of a transition towards a truly digital currency is to just flip the switch at the user's convenience, whether or not they want to pay in Gajus or yen. But this gives them an easy on-ramp. But the requirement to make this work is that each associate chain is an associate in the context of a given currency. So the Taiwan chain that wants to participate in the Japanese yen is an associate of Japan chain in the context of the yen. It is also an associate of the Gaju of Groot in the context of the Gaju. So it has two upstreams. If Taiwan chain wants to send, if a user on Taiwan chain wants to send digital yen from Taiwan chain to, say, Philippine chain is also participating in the yen, for example, the route for that transfer goes from Taiwan chain to Japan chain and then again to Philippine chain. The reason for that is that Japan chain is the final say in how many yen there are and what transactions are authorized to occur and what routes are valid. So you have a tree, a tree, a financial authority graph. It's a directed acyclic graph, a tree, where chain A can be an associate of Groot, right? And chain B is an associate of Groot. So to send money from A to B, Groot can't see into A fully, and it can't see into B fully. So the route for that transfer goes from A to Groot to B. In the context of the yen, we have Taiwan chain and Philippine chain both participating. The route from Taiwan chain to Philippine chain is Taiwan to Japan to Philippines in yen. Does that make sense? So you have this overlay mesh of financial authority graphs where
Does Japan have to agree to this transaction? Like
they have to. Well, they're the ones
they're
that
the people that have the yen.
Yeah, well, they run the consensus for Japan chain, so and it will probably be a permission chain that's run by the central bank, right? So if they want to block a transaction, they could censor it within the context of that. Groot is the place where you can't censor anything. That's because
I think I understood that.
So you have to, like the difficult thing with this is that we say trustlessness. Yes, okay, money, the mint function for the Gaju has to be truly trustless. But beyond that, what do you use money for? You use it for every trustful function. When I buy something from you online, I trust you're going to send it, right? If you don't, I hope there's a law where I can have guys with guns go mess with you for breaking the law, right? I mean, ultimately, it comes down to to arbitrated violence is really that's the way trust systems work, is arbitrated violence. Two lions with meat in the middle, right? They make all kinds of noises at each other. They're all really angry and stuff, but they don't fight because it's too risky to fight directly. So they just try to show each other which one's more dangerous, and then they actually share. Now doing this over time, that mutual capacity for violence is what begets trust signals. Those trust signals are what wind up manifesting society over time. That's what we've evolved for. So at the end, you do have a trustful function somewhere. It has to exist, or you don't have an economy, you don't have a family, you don't have a society. Money, though, itself, the medium of exchange itself, that has to be trustless because there's no single place you can put that authority without it becoming an all-encompassing corrupting function. So the mint function has to be trustless. But every other function, you can make at least in part trustful. And within the context of Japan chain, for example, if there's a bad actor on Japan chain, it's within a single legal jurisdiction. There are cops that can go force a change. You can go back and update the ledger, and you want that ability because you want things like fraud prevention, right?
Mm-hmm.
So fraud prevention is itself a trustful function. So there's a place in the economy for trustful functions, but that can't be at the mint. And that's why the associate chain structure works the way that it does, and that's why it's very highly flexible. Where Japan chain has its own jurisdiction, its own laws that apply to it. Taiwan chain's got its own jurisdiction, its own laws that apply to it. And if you don't do that, you're not going to get adopted. You're not going to be involved in real economy stuff. You're just not. But Groot has to be kind of the Wild West. It has to be this absolute, this place of maximal contention where nobody's allowed to control anything, not even us. That's why we don't have governance. Because we tried really hard to figure out a solution to the governance problem, where how can we how can we make updates happen to the core definition of Groot the way other chains do without having a hidden kind of coercive function, a control function like these other chains have. We couldn't figure out a way around it. So we're like, all right, well, that means that much like Bitcoin, you have to just, once the definition is fully declared, we have to be hands off. But because we have an associate chain structure, you can do any kind of wacko innovation you want on associate chains. As long as those associate chains still speak Gajumaru, as long as they still speak Gaju, right? They can participate in the overall system. But they could have all kinds of radical innovations downstream. The thing that has to be protected is the mint function of the Gaju itself. That's everything. Downstream of that, you can kind of get crazy and do whatever you want. But the fundamental communication of how transfers work is that each currency has to have a financial authority that lives at the top of its tree, and transfers have to occur along routes defined by that tree. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think so. It was a little bit long-winded, but I think you got just. I have one
Adam
more
has
question,
a
but
question.
Adam, yeah,
Okay,
Adam.
go ahead.
Let's go Adam first.
How you doing, Craig?
Hey, how's it going?
Good. So when you're speaking of like a digital yen or another country having a digital currency that sits next to the Gajumaru, that's a digital currency that's created on Groot, on their associate chain, correct?
Not on Groot, on their associate chain. Groot's
Okay, but
Groot's
associate chain is still under Groot. It's still operating within Gajumaru's network.
Yeah. So
Yeah, okay.
those associate chains are all associates of the Gaju. They're all carrying the Gaju, and
Right.
in the context of the Gaju, what's upstream is always Groot.
Right. So when you say downstream, is there really a downstream outside of our network? There's really not, right? There's no
No.
interoperability between our chain and say another chain. So all of these things you're talking about, I get it, and it sounds great. But people have to migrate to Gajumaru. And I mean, currently, how do we have an associate chain other than LTIN?
There's a number that are planned. LTIN is
Okay.
the first. That's the first like government buy-in one where they're
Right.
like, we want Liechtenstein to have an associate chain that's tied into the system. That's the first sort of like flagship case. We're already looking at like what happens if Gaju Express and Capillary catch on. Well, we might saturate Groot pretty quick, so we may have to establish sort of a global, mostly hands-off QPQ chain just to handle just for scaling purposes. But so you said upstream. Upstream is always relative to a given currency. So upstream for Gaju is always Groot. Upstream for another currency might be an associate chain, but if they're all carrying the Gaju, they all have this common upstream, which is Groot, and that's why there's a global height, which is critical because you have to be able to know what time it is. And the Groot generations, the heights of Groot, that acts as a global clock because time is like relative and fake, right? We imagine that time's a real thing.
Yeah.
In a distributed system, it's really, really a fake thing. So you have to have a clock somewhere where we all agree what time it is. And Groot solves that problem with proof of work in a really, really nice way. Anyway, as far as other chains go, like if we want to integrate with Ethereum or whatever, any associate chain could, because they can come up with their own consensus rules, they can come up with their own whatever they want. They just have to speak Gajumaru. You can build a connector there to interoperate with another chain system. And we have all the functionality exists in Groot to validate things. Like we can directly validate Ethereum signatures and Bitcoin signatures. All the math required for that is available within our smart contract language. So we have all the levers, all the tools required to build interchain connectors. The problem is that there's no actual commercial activity happening on any other chain. So there's not really like, they have to stop what they're doing in their business operations and come a dot com. No, nobody's doing anything real on chains. It's all like NFT, Fugazi, never go up stuff. So
yeah, it's ghost coins. You're not really, when you buy Bitcoin, you're not buying Bitcoin. You're buying somebody's stake in Bitcoin that actually owns a Bitcoin, right?
yeah,
I mean,
it's all indirect.
Yeah. So I get that as well. But the way, I don't know, I'm obviously the whole structure is moving from crypto casino to tokenization now, right?
Mhm.
And there's really still nobody using blockchain, which is sad, right? Because
It is.
and now there's all these different people building these different blockchains. Many of them are using AI, which I think is dangerous because AI is going to be picking easy solutions to problems that have all kinds of backdoors and security issues and stuff like that. But what do you guys have a path forward for us to like be able to integrate, and or is it just people need to migrate to Gajumaru, right? Because that's going to be a hard pull. You know what I mean?
Can I ask this differently? Maybe is it like,
Sure.
I think you want to onboard other people, right, from other chains, if I understand that correctly. Is it possible for Solana to be an associate chain on Gajumaru?
It could be,
So
yeah.
they have a sole Gaju pair? Because I think your main idea is you don't want the Gajumaru to be able to go outside of this whole system, right, of Gajumaru itself. So it doesn't become paper Gajumaru like most of the other cryptocurrencies.
Okay.
Right?
Yes and no, because it's inevitable that one of the, you say casino, the exchanges are basically casino. They're not exchanges, right? They're single party. They get to play whatever they want in the back. It's their Postgres database, right? It's inevitable that we'll be picked up by them. And at that point, yeah, they're going to do all the crazy astronautics that they want over there. People just will have to realize over time, like all the crazy stuff that people want to do with like tokenized wrapped Gajus and wrapped whatever, and they're going to do that. We have a DEX. Actually, it's the only DEX in the world that will be FINMA approved. Because it's the only DEX with a capital D. It's the only actually distributed DEX. We don't have a DAO or anything like that. It's purely so the annoying thing about that was that we're like, okay, so how do we pitch this to investors? We can't get fees off of this, and we can't have like a DEX token that does this weird little cycle up thing, and we can't have the automated money market maker thing. We have to just do a straight up order book DEX, which is what a DEX is actually supposed to be. The narrative around DEXs has gone way off into crazy land, absolutely detached from reality. And I guess regulators are fine with that. If maybe they're making money on the back end, I don't know. But we have a purely contract-defined DEX. We're putting an interface on top of it, but by FINMA rules are actually really smart. They're the only regulator I've seen that actually really gets to the bottom of like the essence of the issue. And it is that if you have a web interface that makes it easy to interact with a DEX, that interface cannot be the only way to interact with a DEX. That's step one. So you have to always be able to open GajuDesk, pull up a DEX contract, and fire off your own call transaction, your own contract call to the DEX to actually make a transaction, totally independent of the web interface. That always has to be available. If it's not distributed. It's not a DEX. You're channeling everybody through your only, anointed interface, and that is wrong. That's little d DEX. That's not really distributed. Big D DEX means it lives in contracts and it's purely there. So anyway, having a DEX that gets what? People start making up their own tokens for stuff. Somebody's going to come along and make a wrapped Bitcoin. Someone's going to come along because it's Sophia. You can write anything you want, Sophia. So are these things going to happen? 100% they're going to happen. Are people going to wrap the Gaju on Solana? Yeah, totally they're going to do that. This is not, and people are going to make a fake wrapped Gaju on Solana because that's what they do, right? They come along and they're like, Gaju X whatever shitcoin, and then they make up their like thing, and then they wash trade it, and you see like a token that costs $500 do like 1 million in volume, and it's like it's all wash trading. You look at the accounts; it's like two accounts trading back and forth to each other to make it look like there's volume. That's what Solana is.
There's already some fake Gajus out there.
Okay,
Yeah.
that was quick.
Yeah.
So
Well, their accounts, everybody does this. They jump on like Uniswap, they make a Gaju account, and then they hope that people will send stuff to it, money or tokens, or it's ridiculous. But every DEX does it. Every trading platform does it.
well, they have an incentive to not stop it because they get paid on fees too. So that's one of the things we won't get paid on wash trading because we won't get paid anything just from the DEX in operation. The fact of having a DEX allows us to do interesting things that transcend this nonsense. For example, we can tokenize. We have a contract definition that's approved for us to tokenize and provide secondary markets and securities. So, for example, stock shares. Those can be traded on a DEX legitimately for unprivileged shares. That type of thing we can trade as actual tokens, and that makes perfect sense. That's a good use of this. That's not this wacko number go up nonsense. The part I think that's going to probably wipe out and kill off all this silly wash trading stuff is that over here where we're at, you can use a Gaju to actually pay for a Gaju Express transaction, and you really need that for your company to work. You can come over here and you can buy and sell stuff online on Gaju Market. And when we do Gaju Mall, which is like, it's more like Rakuten or like Amazon or whatever with branding, like shop branding and so on, you can buy real things with actual Gajus, and that's it. Why would you ever want to go to like wacko wash trade market when you can just do real stuff? Same thing with like capillary.
Without an evaluation, how are we going to know how many Gajus to use to buy something? Right? That's even Bitcoin. I mean, when Bitcoin first came out, they paid 10,000 Bitcoins for a piece of pizza or for their first piece of or like whole pizza. I mean, at that point, 10,000 was a good buy for a pizza because who's using it? So, I mean, without that evaluation, right? And which would come from one of those platforms, or I'm not sure how else it would get there. I know you were talking about it when I first got on, but I wasn't sure what the lead into that was.
Right. The current lead in is that if you join whitelist mining, the rough this is a scale calculation, but the rough calculation is that basically the price of mining one Gaju, if you join right now, is about 1 yen. So I'm comfortable selling a bag of, a 5 kilo bag of rice for 3,500 Gajus right now, because that's how much it costs in yen. And that's about the right scale. And that's not now, once we were just talking about this token transition point and getting picked up by exchanges, the more utilities we have that are paid in Gajus, that like, I'm a law firm, I have to send stuff, I need to know it's secure. How do I do that? Well, if I mine a little bit, I have plenty of Gajus to do this transfer service and just use this. And I know that one's secure because I can see everything in it. You get a couple of those use cases going, and then like, oh, also we can buy and sell stuff on a market over there, and this is all roughly yen denominated. Well, then if there's enough interest that an exchange picks us up, because also we speak Rosetta already, so the integration to join an exchange is already done. We don't have to do any extra work for that. So they could just come in and just use our Rosetta interface and we already speak exchange. If anybody wanted to do that at that moment, you have this crazy price instability thing where the speculators show up. Now, the initial price point is based on roughly a penny or a yen or whatever. Okay, we can deal with each other. I can set a price on Gaju Market that you agree to pay, and I'm fine with that. And if we both agree, then that's what the Gaju is worth for that transaction, right? Because it's two parties in agreement. There's no official fee. There's no like official statement of price in markets. That's what the market function is price finding. So price discovery is the market function in a nutshell. Once that in a closed and sort of a circular economy, like we can do right now, it's roughly a yen because that's the price of entry. That starts changing when we externalize this and wind up getting picked up just through basic utility use that nobody else has. Nobody has a useful thing running on chain. Capillary, Gaju Express, Gaju Pay, those type things just existing will inevitably get picked up by an exchange, whether or not we push that. When that happens, now we have an externalized economic market function, and that externalized function is going to totally swamp whatever our internal market function is for a time. That it doesn't last forever, but there will be a period, and that's where you wind up getting number go up, and you're going to have like everybody from like, the street pooping countries are going to be like going crazy on Twitter with like their bot accounts and going nuts and trying to run the number up. That's annoying, but that's just going to happen. Now there's obviously we would all benefit, but that's not the point. The point is to find a stable index of value, eventually establish a stable index of value based on real goods, not on wacko exchange prices. I think that because we can integrate so smoothly with regional regulations, but that's the big blocker in crypto, is that why does all activity happen off chain? Well, it happens off chain because one, the blockchains don't work as well as they claim to. So there's a practical limit. Like nobody can actually satisfy the TPS they claim, right? But the second part is regulatory. They push you into a KYC scheme. Then they make up the travel rule that says, oh, well, every transaction you have to have the data travel with the crypto, or else you're in violation of AML laws and whatever. That has resulted in a market aggregation. So there's only 3 big KYC providers, and there's only 3 big exchanges, and it's all kind of one big blob of stuff. And if you try to operate outside of that system, you're a bad guy. Well, you're a bad guy because nobody knows how to regulate these chains and make chains work with regulation. The fact that we can isolate the mint function and group and provide associate chains that can be compliant with local regulation and have local operators that are known, not ephemeral entities out there who are like stakers, known entities that can be regulated. The cops can go to their address. They know who they are. If you make that transition, you can use this undebasable currency in a context that is very amenable to regulation, and that makes governments comfortable. That regulation makes vendors comfortable, and you can get actual commercial adoption on chain instead of inside of wacko exchange space.
Yeah. So when I was talking to Jennifer about this, actually, when I created it, that Gaju spin wheel that I created, where people can come and spin, and I give them Gajus out of my wallet, for free. And then if they want, they could come and like sign up for a wallet, and then they can purchase more Gajus for, 2 more spins for $1 or 3 more spins for $5, and which actually gives each Gaju kind of a value without being associated with an exchange, right? So that's why I was kind of developed that to kind of organically give a valuation, right? So I think Jennifer tried it out and paid a few dollars and got like 30 Gajus or something. So that into that number is the equal of that Gaju per that transaction, right?
That's right.
Yeah, so that's kind of what I was hoping. So I'm going to try to push that out a little bit more, hopefully getting people to sign up for wallets. That's the main thing, trying to get people, hey, it's a free wallet, just sign up for it, here's some free Gajus. And then hopefully they turns into a mining contract. But so I just was wondering if that was the right way to go about it to give some valuation to it. You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, absolutely.
Okay.
So if you go to test.gaju.market, you can see a test for, it's like a MVP version of Gaju Market. And all it is like online classifieds, where I have like a bicycle that I want to sell, and I'm going to put it up for X number of Gajus, and anybody wants to buy it, they click buy. You wind up in this like chat screen between the buyer and the seller, so you can negotiate shipping or an adjustment to price or whatever. There's no way to solve human problems with technology, so you just got to put the humans in touch with each other, right? So that's what it does. Very, very simple concept. But when it comes to valuing Gajus, we can also start with just a market function of saying, I'm going to sell some coffee beans online. I'm going to denominate that sale in Gajus. That puts a floor under the Gaju price as well. And now you're doing a thing, we're doing a thing in Gaju Market, we're doing a different thing with Gaju Express, we're doing a thing in Gaju Pay, and so on. You start eventually kind of getting this general sense of what a Gaju's worth in this circular economy, right? Now, that moment that you open it up to cross-chain stuff and exchanges and whatever, the value goes blah to like crazy land, but only for a while. It will eventually stabilize again. And then we have the whole point is to get current flows, right? We want currency flows. We don't want just like, I'm sitting on all the Gajus, I'm the king of the world. Like, that's silly. That's like a childish view of like what wealth is, right? They think Elon Musk has like billions of dollars under his mattress. Like, that's not how money works at large scale. But people don't know that unless they touch it and do things. So we want to get, I guess this is one of the biggest problems of crypto as a whole, is that they've tried incredibly hard to avoid the retail market. And I think that's wrong-minded. The whole point of cryptocurrency was to be from the bottom up instead of the top down type proposition. And that means retail. That means people just like, I want to do freelance programming work, but I live in like some country where the banking system's unreliable. That's true for a lot of people. There's some really smart dudes that want to get, like, if you've ever done programming work or try to have a development team that's like remote, you're going to find these brilliant dudes that live in like some country where the banking system's super unreliable and they get screwed all the time, or the transfer rules are insane. Paying them with Gajus, it's like they're paid. It's done. Nothing between me and them. They're just paid. And they're really, really happy for that. Now, if they can also go online and buy like, milk and cheese with it, awesome. So Gaju Pay allows that also to happen in person, right? So you can have Gaju Mobile, which I'm doing the background libraries for Gaju Mobile right now. The interface stuff that we pushed out, that's kind of like giving me, okay, what screens do I kind of need to put as an interface over these libraries and so on. That's proceeding as we go. But the whole point eventually is to be able to have a vendor who only has a smartphone at his cash register, and a buyer who's also got a smartphone can just go, bink, okay, I paid for it, and it's accounted, and that accounting is tracked, and he can go back and get a printout. The vendor can get a printout for tax purposes later with all the correct annotations. That's the value actually that Gaju Pay provides for vendors, is it does accounting in the background for them, so which can integrate with their tax system, and which is like a huge headache for people trying to accept crypto. So
By the way, I just wanted to say that we are working on materials for this because we don't have the details on the website yet. So maybe people are a bit lost about what you're talking about.
Yeah.
But yeah, we're working on the materials. It's just taking a bit of time.
Yeah. One of the problems with materials is like I keep changing stuff, which is my bad. The reason that happens is that as we, like, the way Gaju Express came to be was realizing, wait, we have public keys that work this way. There's another representation of that actually is literally the way that noise protocol public keys work. We can just do totally secure point-to-point transactions or point-to-point secure transfers for people, and we could charge for it because we're integrated with a blockchain, right? The payment system's already there. We don't have to have like credit card providers and stuff. We could just do it. So awesome. So that's how that came to be. And in the course of doing that, we looked at the insecurity that's been lingering since the 90s. When I was in the 90s as like, a young programmer trying to go do fun stuff, mostly games back then. We had this problem that DNS is insecure fundamentally. And we're just going to, it's really just like a trust me bro system. DNSSEC doesn't fix that. Neither does IPsec. It's a white lie that it does. And the certificate authority system, imagine having hundreds of certificate authorities, all given equal weight, none of which are told to you when you go to a website, and you have to make hundreds of requests to different endpoints. And if one of them is compromised, they're all compromised. Imagine none of them being compromised, given the upside of compromising any one of them. If you're like the NSA or the CCP or whoever, right? It's 100% guaranteed that the certificate authority system's compromised, right? So how do you escape from that? Well, that's a hard problem. We'll push it off for later. And we've just never gotten back to revisiting that problem. And we realized we do have a solution for that here, which is on-chain lookups that provide your service endpoint and your certificates and everything all at once. And those are governed by a separate key that's also governed on-chain. So if you solving proof of work in this context where we can have contracts as lookup points for services, and we have a naming system too, you can escape the sort of the tyranny of the domain name and TLS system. And so that all came out as a consequence. I didn't plan that to be the case. That came out as a consequence of implementing Gaju Express and then thinking about how do I actually make a guarantee that these are secure point-to-point connections. And that fell out of it, is that, oh, there's this generic thing we could do that actually replaces TLS and DNS, which is way better. So that's going to be a huge thing for nerds around the world. Consumer people won't care about that, but it's actually going to, that'll be a big deal. All this anyway. So my point is that as we implement these things, we start realizing like, whoa, this thing we have is a really powerful system that actually solves these old problems nobody wanted to visit because they were hard problems. The hard problems we've already solved lend themselves to solutions to previously ignored hard problems. And so as we go through things, we need to do a better job of expressing what we're coming up with. And thank goodness Cecil's here to help do that expression, because I'm really bad at like publicly expressing what we're doing. She's got a much better way of framing things, thank goodness. But we have a lot of catch up to do in terms of publicly expressing what we're going through and why things are changing the way they are. But I guess the reason I'm excited right now is that we're in productization phase. So we're not just like figuring out some abstract math thing. Now it's like, oh, we can actually do these things and we can publish these projects and they actually work for real. And these are cool. And every one of them solves a problem we actually have internally. Like one of our lawyers needed to send a private key to a guy, well, send like login credentials or whatever to one of the guys on our team. And he's not a technical guy. He doesn't know how to do that. He doesn't know what's safe and what's not, because the internet doesn't really tell you what's safe and what's not. It would be easy for me to tell him, open Gajudesk, press E, put his key in the thing, and then send him the file that way. That's easy. We could tell him to do that. But that type of solution does not actually exist right now on the internet, which is crazy. But this is a problem that exists for a lot of different industries. And once we realize that, we're like, oh, we can do that and denominate that service in Gajus, and it's all done. We don't even have to have a website for that. It's just in Gajudesk. So that kind of stuff is pretty cool. But that gives a utility value to the Gaju, which is a little bit separate from the buying products on Gaju Market value to the Gaju. So the more of those we get, the more concrete the value. You get these different vectors pointing at what the value of the Gaju is. And the more of those pointers you get, the more solid that value becomes. Does that make sense, Adam? Sorry, I got long-winded there, but.
Yeah, it does. Thank you. Jen, I think
Jennifer
Jen.
has a question.
Hey, how are you?
Hello.
I'm interested in like as a builder. I'm not a builder or a developer. Like, can you explain how Gajudesk? I could so some random person can download Gajudesk right now, go to the function tab, write a contract, build a website, and use like Gaju authentication or whatever it's called.
Yes,
And
ma'am.
build that website.
They could, yeah. We need to document the process behind that a little bit more to make it more like clear to people who are not already intimate with Gajumaru. But yes, that's available right now that can be done.
Okay, cool. Can you do like a walkthrough someday? Like just like pretend build something using the Gajudesk?
Sure. I did one the other day, actually on my personal blog, which is only kind of for mega nerds. I wrote up a thing about how to just deploy your first contract in a couple minutes.
Okay. Cool.
Let me put I'll put a link to it. That's not the right screen. I'll put a link to it here real quick. Let me get a hold of it. I did a video about this too, but it's not as smooth as it could be. I'd like to do like a nice little walkthrough. This is my initial in-text tutorial form of that. Is this thing over there in the chat window?
Okay.
So that has a, starting from zero, you can just go. There's some discussion about smart contracts. It's a bad name. They're really ledger logic or whatever. But we get down to like the Gajumaru hello world, what's required? Just the basic elements. You declare a contract, you give a value to the state, and then you can call a function to get that state back. And in GajuDesk, that's all done for you because we store contract source on chain, which I don't know why nobody else does that, but it's like awesome. It's super, like we first did it and we're like, are we wrong? Because no one's doing this, but we should try it. And it turns out it's a major superpower. If you open GajuDesk and you have the contract address to any contract on the chain, you can just say load from chain and it'll pull the contract into Fate Weaver, which is that contract interface, and it builds out the call interface for you. And when you click call or dry run is just to read stuff from the chain or to prospectively run something for free. When you call, you have to pay gas to have that actually included as a transaction on the chain for everybody. So a call is a stateful transition. It's a full transaction. A dry run is like local to whatever node you ask. You're like, dry run for this for me and just tell me what the result is. So there's a difference between dry runs and calls. But that interface is built out for you. There's a call button and there's a dry run button for each contract function. From any contract that you load, you just call it. It calls the chain node, asks, it runs the transaction, sends you the result. And GajuDesk actually decodes the results so you get the Sophia terms. So you get, like, if the return value is 11, for example, you don't just get back CT ABXY blah 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 blah. Like, who knows what that is? It decodes that for you, and you get the actual Sophia term, which is the number 11 for that call. So if you're calling, what's the IP address to this whatever, and the contract tells you, it decodes that, and you actually see the actual return result. So that, anyway, that's described in that blog post. I want to do that's a casual blog post. I'd like to do a more formal blog post and put it on the Gajumaru.io developer blog. And I'd like to do some videos about this that are just that's what I've been streaming lately. Is like I wrote a lot of that functionality during live streams on YouTube. They're not the most exciting streams. They're usually me scratching my head going, how do I do whatever? But that's, anyway, this is the process we've adopted of documenting things without having to stop the world to document stuff, is to, as I'm developing things, kind of write a messy personal blog post and then maybe rehash that as a more formal one on the company website or something. And then moving on with like the next thing.
Yeah, because I don't think people realize how powerful GajuDesk is. Like,
yeah,
I
GajuDesk
don't-
is nuts. Actually, it's turning into something crazy.
yeah. All right, cool. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. Similarly, GajuDesk, the next big update to it will have Gaju Express in it. So when you open GajuDesk from that main screen where you're used to seeing with like your accounts and your balance or whatever, if you just press E, I'm going to run out of space for buttons, so we're just going with hotkeys. If you just press E for Express, Gaju Express will open. If you press F for Fate Weaver, that contract, right now it's a little function button. If you press F, it'll open Fate Weaver, which is the contract development interface. But all those things being accessible from GajuDesk is really cool. Oh, sorry, I'm excited about this. So the next step with Gaju Mobile, when Gaju Mobile comes out, I want to be able to have Gaju Mobile do your GajuDesk signatures for you if you don't want to have your private keys on your computer. Because there's people using Windows spies on you, Apple spies on you. Like we're in a really bad space with personal computing right now. So if you don't want your private keys on your actual computer that's connected to the internet, we've already gotten GajuDesk out of the browser, right? So that's a huge improvement to security. The next step is to get those private keys totally out of GajuDesk also, if you want to, at your option. So when it comes time to sign a transaction with GajuDesk, if you have registered your key to be private to something else, GajuDesk will, within your home network, let you sign with it with your phone with Gaju Mobile, and it will do grids across your local network to your GajuDesk on your notebook, and that transaction will go out. So we can get your private keys off of your PC.
Okay. How is grids any different than a YubiKey? Or
Grids is the protocol. It's the way that Gajumaru devices speak to each other. It's not a key itself. It's a way of speaking. So a YubiKey it's the thing and the style of talking. Grids is just the style of talking isolated from everything else. So we've extracted that as its own little communication mechanism.
okay.
So it's a special type of URL. That's basically what grids is. So you see like grids : / / right?
Mhm.
Inside now the part after that, you'll have either a chain name or you'll have a network address. So it might be something.com, or it might be an IP address, or it might be groot.mainnet, right? But a chain, so it's one of the three. It's a chain name or a node address somewhere. Then there's a slash, and then there's a couple things after that slash that are instructions to whatever's reading the URL that tell it what type of action to prepare itself for. And then there's stuff afterwards, which is the location or executable data at the end of it, or informative data like queue data after it. It takes that and it translates that into the next action it should take. So grids is a way to use a URL scheme to pass a special instruction to your wallet and say, you should prepare a transaction to Adam for this much with this annotation added to it. And then it brings up the transaction screen and you agree or you don't. It can't do anything by itself, but it can tell the wallet how to prep these things with no possibility for human error. And that's the biggest problem is if I told you, you need to transfer this many Gajus to Adam, here's his public key, and you're going to type his public key, and it's like, okay, AK underscore, where's underscore on my phone? Big B, little Z, so, like that's ridiculous. So if I can just give you a URL, which we can encode that same URL as a QR code, you can just show your phone, your camera to it, and it goes pop, and the instructions in that URL, and now you can do that smoothly. So that's what grids really, at its core, that's what grids is. Around that, we've been able to build all kinds of cool stuff because we can have one device speak to another device through these little tiny queues, including there's a special queue that tells a device to pick up a bigger message, something you can't encode in a URL, pick up a bigger message from another system in the context of Gajumaru and which key to sign it with and prompt the user to do this or that. It's really slick. So that's been a big win, but that's at its core, grids is a communication system. It's a way of speaking. That's also why it's hard. Like you can't, people are like, well, where's the patent for that? And it's like, well, you can't, it's like patenting English. You can't really patent a protocol in that way. But all the stuff around it, maybe you could, the things you build on it. Right. But it's like, you're not gonna, you don't get a license to speak English, I guess. Well, in certain eras of certain time periods, it's been like that, but we don't live in that world today. But at its core, grids is a communication system. So that allows us to do things like remove the secret key from, like you can keep your secret separate from the execution context, because the execution context is where you're going to get attacked from whatever site you're looking at. They might send crazy stuff at you. So, okay, fine. That's compromised. We can't protect that. Fine. Okay, that's out of our hands. But we can develop a secure system somewhere else on a different system that can do the signature and then send it out to that possibly compromised system, and they never get to see your private key. So that's what grids fundamentally was. That's the initial problem it was designed to solve.
Okay, and one quick question: when you were talking about the Groot and associate chains, like how is that on the ledger, like all tracked? Like when you're corresponding with other like chains, is that on the Explorer or just like how like will they have their own Explorer? Like
Yeah, so each different chain would have its own Explorer, and what we're looking at doing is having a meta Explorer that would have like, the problem is that these chains are all so fast independently that like if we have a meta explorer, I don't know how we would make one that's fast enough to track every chain. So we're going to have to partition that a little bit somehow. Because
Okay.
if we start doing hundreds of transactions over here per second, and then hundreds of transactions over here per second, and then this associate chain internally is actually a centralized thing like Solana that's like way faster, I don't know how we're going to make a single explorer that captures all that.
Mhm.
So there may be some aggregation. Anyway, my point is that the explorer lives outside of the chain. It watches the chain and reports on it, right?
Okay.
I would like to have an aggregation site that has kind of like general Gajumaru activity, but I don't think we're going to be able to get one that captures everything globally all the time. So each chain does have, well, there's private chains too, like for corporate ledger uses, like serial number tracking and things like that. If you're in an industry group and you don't want fraud to happen, where like fake serial numbers for old parts that aren't real, counterfeit part stuff, you want to have a ledger that no database administrator can go in and backdate the creation of a fake serial number to validate a parts counterfeiter. That happens in aviation all the time right now. It's really scary. You got on an airplane, you're like, oh, this is safe. Like you have counterfeit like fan blades on the jet engine. That's scary. So that's literally a big problem. I mean, I don't want to scare everybody too much, but that's literally a big problem right now. And one way to solve that is to have a blockchain used as the ledger that's keeping track of serials, because nobody can go back and you can't change the date of something in the past, because that changes every hash going forward, and it screws everything up. So that across an industry group is a really powerful anti-fraud. It's a good fraud prevention measure. So there's going to be stuff like that happens, and those would happen on private associate chains where they're using Gajus to stake in a competitive sense, where if anyone is a bad actor with that industry group, they could be penalized to the point like they could have their stake taken, right? So that's a defensive measure within a chain like that, and you wouldn't want that stuff on a ledger, like or on an explorer. So there's kind of some picking and choosing of what makes sense to put on an explorer.
Okay. Thanks for the answer. Appreciate it.
Sure. Let's see.
Just a quick question.
Sure.
If people want to build an associate chain, I assume that they're gonna have their own devs that are gonna program everything. But does everybody need to learn Fate in order to do this, or can you use other programming languages too? Probably not, right?
Yeah. So Fate is the runtime engine's name. That's the VM's name. The language, Sophia, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, they would need to use Sophia, but all the tools exist to write a different language if they want to. I've used other
Does
blockchain
it
language.
get auto converted into Sophia, or how can they deploy it?
They would have to write a parser for that could parse it into Fate primitives, so it could be executed onto Fate. So they would fundamentally be writing a new language to work in Fate, so that you can't use a general programming language for a blockchain safely. And the reason is that the primitives in general programming languages are not really amenable to dealing with chain objects. So, for example, floats, pointers, floating point numbers have rounding errors. You can't get rid of that. So Fate or Sophia only has integers, and it only has big num integers. So there's no, instead of like, one of the biggest annoyances if you write anything in Solidity for Ethereum, for example, is that for some, I don't know why, this is the craziest thing they've done, but they've got sized, bit width word, they've got byte words sized variables. So you say, this is a signed integer, it's an 8-bit signed integer, right? Well, an 8-bit signed integer, by the rules of 8-bit signed integers, I can make the value of that integer go up to 127. And then 127 plus 1 is negative 126. Because it's only got 8 bits. You can only represent this much stuff. So plus 1 to it rolls the number over to its maximum negative value.
I think you talked about this in one of your videos. I'm not sure exactly which one. But the angle that I'm going to, or why I'm asking this, is in order for adoption to happen, you need a lot of people that can actually do stuff on it,
Mhm.
right? I don't know how far along the documentation is, or how used Sophia in general is. Does that mean that if you guys want like mass adoption, you'll need to build a school that teaches this language, or can other people already come in with their skills and start building without knowing Sophia? That's my main point why I'm
Yeah,
asking this, because I want to understand how easy it is to actually come and build something on Gajumaru.
right. Yeah. So that's a good question. The Sophia is easy enough that if you've ever done anything in a functional or even a procedural language like Python, JavaScript, not even airline, you don't have to be an airline guy to understand it. Um, it's really, really simple to understand. Similarly, I mean that was the problem with Solidity. Also, was Solidity is actually way harder to learn than Sophia. Like all the pitfalls in Solidity just don't exist in Sophia. That's why it was written. Um, that like back in the mists of time, we actually were compliant with the EVM. The problem with the EVM that we found is that the EVM itself is broken. It's not fit for purpose. There are dangerous opcodes in it that let you do crazy things. All the DEX hacks have been based on stuff like that. Um, Basic security checks that any novice programmer would come up with. Oh, make sure that integer a is big, make sure that input variable a is larger than 5 before we proceed. Stuff like that, right? Well, okay, I'm going to make my input be, you know, 130 or yeah, 130. Well, now it's rolled back down, or I'm going to take, instead of being bigger than 5 on the input level, I'm going to say it's minus 130. Well, when that gets translated, that's a number greater than 5. So when you try to fit these things into bit sizes, you wind up getting these weird results because you have to wrap around both directions with these integers. That's a stupid category of problem to have. Why permit that category of error to exist in a language that's supposed to handle money? That's ridiculous. Like, that's dumb. So just don't have that category of error if you can avoid it. So that's what Fate is it's like it's a specifically money, it's a blockchain focused runtime that was built for purpose. And the language, Sophia, is a functional language that does not have the pitfalls of Solidity specifically to build that for purpose. And that's why, like, I would never want to write a smart contract in like pretty much anything else that exists right now. That's why I work here, because it's better. Um, the yeah, as far as like having to learn Solidity, learn Sophia. Learning Sophia, it's never been easier to learn how to make a blockchain work than to come. So, okay, here's my pitch. You said like have a university to teach this or whatever. My whole pitch for this is like, okay, go to the Ethereum website right now and go click on developer thing, and then look at the number of tools that you see listed. There's all these cool logos. It's all cool looking blockchain, cool guy stuff. It looks neat, man. 80% of those projects are unfinished or don't work. All of them require you to jump down to the command line or do a bunch of weird stuff. You don't know what's happening, and you're installing tens of thousands of NPM packages to get Hello World to happen. That's freaking nuts. And it's going to take you all day just to get like an environment set up. It's stupid. And you can't trust anything you're seeing because some of the, like early on, the first time I tried Ethereum, the answers that my simulation harness gave me were different answers than the blockchain actually gave me. But I'm supposed to be dealing with other people's money. So even like being off by one whatever the subunit is, that's unacceptable. So I'm like, well, I can't trust this. I can't write like an online betting app for people with any confidence at all that my stuff works and it doesn't accidentally burn tokens inside of the contract that are just trapped there forever. I have no guarantee that I can give anybody over this because there's no way to validate anything. It's nuts. It's absolutely crazy. So contrast that with, I can tell somebody, hey, you want to learn blockchain stuff? I know you're not interested in Gajumaru, but this is definitely the easiest place to come check it out. So get GajuDesk, press F, and then write a little contract. On this website, there's a tutorial just to get started. Now there's full Sophia documentation over here. If you go to gajumaru.io, click build, at the bottom there's Sophia is listed, and there's Sophia docs on that site. There's also Hakuzaru docs on that site for the Erlang interface library for like back end web stuff, whatever. If you can just play, you can just play with Sophia live right there on the test net. You can go to the faucet, get yourself 10 Gajus from the faucet on the test net, and you're not running stuff in a simulator. You're running stuff on a live test net right then. So you know what the latencies are, you know how things feel. You can write out your web backend against your contracts that you just wrote in Gaju Desk. You can do all this very, very smoothly, and it's super simple to learn. And Sophia is such a simple language that I mean, let's see, 7 of the guys that I've worked with, 3 of them knew Sophia ahead of time. We've never had like, it's like you get it within a day, because the kind of question you have is like, oh, well, how do I make the case statement work? And you go, oh, you have like a maybe or value type thing, and it matches on that, and that's it. And they go, oh, okay. That's like the hard part of learning Sophia. Maybe type annotations. The fact that it's typed would surprise like a JavaScript programmer, but these days most people write TypeScript, and it's very natural for a TypeScript guy to see the type annotations there. So my point is, yes, they have to learn Sophia. The good part is that they're using Sophia instead of something that's like scary, and learning Sophia is very, very simple. It's very easy.
Okay.
Okay, I think Anne has a question, and also Paul.
Okay. Yeah, Paul's got 2.
So you talk a lot about how what Bitcoin misses is the ability for things being, sorry, I'm a little bit tired. It's that there's not a possibility with Bitcoin to build easily build things on top of it. But what I hear, I don't know, what I hear from other people is that there is actually a lot of innovation being built on top of Bitcoin. I know that, for example, Jeff Booth has even a fund that invests in specifically those companies. How is the Gajumaru then different from the applications that are being built on top of Bitcoin right now? Maybe that was partly answered by the previous question, but
Yeah. So the one that's difficult to integrate with is Ethereum, not Bitcoin, but they both share this property that the core chains themselves are a little bit difficult to integrate with, and they're a little bit difficult to do anything advanced in a safe way with. And it's hard when I say difficult to integrate with. If you want to write a contract on Ethereum, I'm going to become an Ethereum developer, and then you just like the ground's cut out from under you, and there's no really easy path forward, and there's 1,000 pitfalls, and the entire industry is based on telling people, this is too scary for you, you should hire a consultancy. Oh, by the way, there's one huge one over here, and it's the only one that anyone uses. And it's in their like they're incentivized to make sure that situation remains the same, because it guides everybody to them. The second part of that is that the innovation that's happening, yeah, they're innovating, but the way they're innovating is they are innovating how to make derivatives of derivatives stacked on top of derivatives, all off chain, maybe with some pointer that's on chain. Maybe. Okay, so I've got a Bitcoin on Bitcoin or on Ethereum. I've got like a contract tag that points to me owning something like an NFT. Well, that NFT's price is being traded off chain on this exchange over here. Well, here's a side bet that I can make on whether or not the price is going to change. And then here's options on that side bet for the ephemeral asset that is pointed to on chain. Nobody got a new car out of this. Nobody built anything new. No new corn was like grown because of this. This didn't get a new, like, no child was educated. No shoes were produced. Like, nothing happened. So yeah, they're being very innovative, but it's all innovative in the world of ephemera. And the problem, our basic concept is, if you can't buy a t-shirt on a normal web shop with this currency, then it's not a currency. So what are you even doing? Like, they're doing lots of astronautics because another dirty truth. We're at the end of a bubble, and that bubble is being propped up. Like, remember all that printing that happened during COVID? It had to go somewhere, or else your food prices would be 300 times higher right now. Those prices have gone to people that were close to the source of inflation. Those people had nowhere to put it because no economy in the universe is big enough to absorb all those numbers. So we've got fake stock prices. We have fake stock prices propping up a fake AI industry, and they're propping up fake crypto prices. And they have to put all that into derivatives of derivatives and abstract assets, because if that were to collapse and all that money had to go somewhere, it would come into the consumer economy and you wouldn't be able to buy milk because you're not part of the club. That is what's going on over there. And that is absolute poison. And banking people would love to take shots at me for saying that, but it's just true. Like, they can be mad about it, but they can't deny the fact that what I just said is true. And that's absolute poison. So to make crypto actually work and be true, you have to be able to buy a pair of shoes online, or else it's not money. And if it's not money, what the hell are you doing? So that's like that's the underlying core principle. So that's why, instead of chasing that stuff, so there's another aspect of this, which is very large crypto projects kill small crypto projects by pointing the cat laser. That's what we call it. So, we have sigils. We got to do sigils too. We've got this TPS amount. We have to have that TPS or else we're nobody. We have this innovation in our contract. We have to do that too. So it's all this Me Too featureism. Meanwhile, they haven't actually implemented the things they often say that they're going to do. So a big project can say, well, we're going to do X, or we're going to do Y, or we're looking at doing Z. And small crypto projects, they freak out. And they're like, oh my God, we have to put all of our resources on this thing. Well, they exhaust their funding that quick chasing this impossible thing. And that project now goes away. Competition's cleared. You don't have to face hard competition because you're killing off small crypto projects by freaking out their leadership by pointing the cat laser around. Meanwhile, nobody can buy a t-shirt online yet. That's the whole
Yeah, it's
trick.
very strange that there's so much money in an industry that doesn't actually do anything. But when it comes to what you said about all the printed money has to go somewhere, why would the Gajumaru not become involved in, being propped up like crazy and become another asset for speculation? I mean, I know
it will be.
part of that is the bill, yeah.
But bottom line, it will be. And that's the point. Like I said, the price and stability issue. We'll all be really happy with the fiat price until that fiat won't buy anything at any price. Right? So, and this is like, go back through, if you spend some time researching the history of money itself, that's kind of what always happens. There has no fiat in history has ever survived. None of them. They all hit an endpoint, and some of them very recently have. None of these last forever, and it's because they're all debasable, and the minting function is always controlled by somebody who's got bigger guns than you, and it does come down to being that basic. It is literally a social it's a social function. That's the arbitration of violence, is what we use commerce for. And when you are just doing abject money printing, you are exercising your advantage over a monopoly of violence until finally people have had enough, and then things go really bad. So ultimately my goal, what's Craig's altruistic goal? My personal goal, and the whole reason I got into this in the first place, is that this system needs an off pressure valve. So we don't wind up with a kind of 1930s leading to 1940s problem, and I think we all remember what happened then. There were hyperinflation issues that spilled out into the consumer economy at that moment that really they weren't the sole trigger, but they were accelerants to existing social pressures that were being suppressed, and we may recognize some patterns of that today. So my goal would be to avoid having to go to those extremes by providing there's too much steam in the tank. There needs to be a little emergency cock that goes, psh, lets some off. That off gassing will be speculation in the Gaju because we're the only one that do real things. Yeah. for a moment, that'll be like party time for us. But then it's like that party time is sort of leading something a little bit darker, and we'll be glad that there will have been at least a backup. That's a possible outcome. Um, and it's none of these are really happy topics to talk about. Unfortunately, it'd be more fun to just talk about like, hey, we have a new feature, yay. That's more fun. But there's this underlying problem when you talk about the structure of value, uh, which is exactly the question that you asked, is about the structure of value. And we are making increasingly complex networks of ephemeral values to trap money so that it trickles out into the consumer economy slower instead of just being dumped there. And it's in every player's interest at a certain size of player is in their interest to not wait for that to happen, but to be the one that initiates it so they know when it'll happen. So like if a bad thing's going to happen, everybody, and it depends on all of us. Like let's create a thought experiment. All of us know that the floor is going to fall at some point, and any one of us could trigger it. Any one of us could trigger it, right? Now, you all promised me that you're not going to trigger it, and I promise you I'm not going to trigger it. All of us have an incentive to be the one that triggers it so that we can be the ones to jump at the right time. Okay, that's fundamentally unstable. So, I mean, that's, again, people don't talk about this shit out loud. They should, but they don't. That's why we're having an AMA. You get the unfiltered me. But that's kind of that's literally where we are. And we can make up all kinds of like wacko reasons why that's not true. We can dive into different theories of value if we want to try to pretend that that's not true. But history is still history, and we're still part of it. And we're not the end of history. We are the chapters that our children are going to read about. And it's always good to remember that that's true.
I'm sorry to interrupt you, but you just summed up my journey for the last 5 years, basically in crypto. It's like literally the whole reason why I thought that this might be the next thing, the natural revolution, right? But you literally just summed it up, basically, put it so nicely. Sorry to interrupt, but this was beautiful.
Oh, that it's taken a long time to figure out how to articulate these things. Because there's a lot of them that are kind of obvious intuitions that we have, and a big problem that we've had. So Peter Harpending, you may have seen his name around. Jarvis, Cecile, Greg Chu, Ulf, Dimitar, all of us, we have extended discussions about topics that are adjacent to this, and a lot of times those discussions are wordplay. There's a lot of laughing in those discussions because funny stuff comes up a lot, but a lot of it's wordplay to try to figure out how to articulate our intuitions about these things and how to formalize those intuitions of form. And that's been hard. So my personal blog, which I linked earlier, it's not always the happiest place, but there's a lot of things we've written and spent a lot of time to try to figure out how to articulate some of these things about how trust works, why violence is the root of negotiation, which sounds counterintuitive and so on. So anyway, does that kind of answer your question?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. Yeah. I'm asking because I it is hard to articulate these things, and then when I talk about the Gajumaru with other people, it's I'm sensing that I don't really know what to answer sometimes. So that's really helpful. But I have one more question. Do you think the world is ready for the Gajumaru?
I think if we can, so the world's not ready for me to go out and say, hey, you should use state channels. And you go, what are state channels? And I'm like, oh, well, what it is your system's going to create a request to create an endpoint at this, and then their side's going to make an endpoint over here. And they're just go to sleep and no, they're not ready for that. What they are ready for is for me to say, hey, I have a problem. I want to make microtransactions like a couple hundred times per second, not crazy, like maybe 10 times per second. That's pretty fast though, right? And they need to be at sub-cent amounts. They need to be all validated. And I need to be able to get a service contract with a service provider where I don't put $1,000 up front and I can't get a refund over my unused portion. I just want to be able to lightly try this out. And if it doesn't work, just cut it and get my money back. Can I do that? Yes, you can do that with Capillary. They're ready to hear that. So yes, but figuring out how to. That's why Cecile's here. Actually, she's the one that reminds me constantly. The stuff you talk about, people don't get. Stop it. Or every time I come up with a feature, she's laughing now. Every time I come up with a feature, she's like, "Name that," and I'm like, "What do you mean name it? It's a contract call interface." She's like, "No, no, no, no. You need to name that because people don't understand what a contract call is to start with. You have to give them a name that they can grab onto with their head, so they can then hear the rest of the discussion." And I am really bad at that. She is really good at that, and she, I get pestered pretty regularly. But it's not pestering, but it's just sort of like, "Hey, by the way, did you come up with a name for whatever?" And I'm like, "Oh, yeah, right." And then I'll go off with like we'll go off with the boys and we'll have a wacky conversation trying to figure out a name for a thing. And finally,
Yeah,
one
developers are notoriously bad at talking about what they're doing at all to everybody else. And I think that's been the problem that we've had over the year. Like we haven't really talked about the stuff. Like Gajudesk is it's just there, but there's so much that you can do about it, like, with it. So everything ends up getting understated. And so that's why, okay, name this, name this, name this. We have to talk about this like separately, not just a mention footnote at one article or one tweet. It's got to have its own. And that's what we're doing right now, playing catch up with these things and trying to get everything out in a more boisterous way.
Yeah.
Because that's where we lose out when we're fighting against people who are good sales talkers, right? It's not necessarily that they have better technology, it's that they're better at selling themselves. And so yeah, we're working on that right now, like
Yeah.
trying to get things out.
Well, I would call that QPQ speak, where they have a language, but no one else knows what that is.
Right.
And
Yeah, yeah,
so,
they have
so-
their own language. Yeah.
so I thought Anne had two great questions tonight. And the last was about the use cases for other blockchains, which is, it's frightening because of coming from a financial services background, knowing what some of these people are proposing. There's a lot of behind the scenes human intervention going on. So there's no scale, and it's a little concerning. So they're not selling a true blockchain. And we've seen that time and time again. So there's no scale. So Craig can appreciate that aspect of that. Your first question about what was it? Regarding why these licenses, why are we paying for these licenses? If I was left to my own devices, there's no way to be able to figure out how to mine. So the fact that I can purchase this software to be able to mine and be able to get this is just pretty powerful. So that's pretty incredible, because I've gotten that same question from people. It's like, why do I have to pay for this? It's like, well, if you had to figure this out yourself, I don't know if it would ever happen. It would never happen for me. So I'm just not that savvy. But I think the issue I keep facing is the questions from miners was, well, what do I do with this? Like, what's the future here? And I think if we could articulate some of the vision forward, it's like not tomorrow we're going to put this on an exchange, but it's like, hey, what's the vision for using these coins? And I think some of the things Craig articulated tonight was helpful to hear, but I think that would help, because we're right now in a little bit of a stalled phase with the mining, recruiting miners. I think that would be helpful, is kind of elaborating on that vision, because I've never heard of Gaju Express or capillaries. In just full disclosure,
These just
I'm an
fell out
investor.
recently. Yes.
Yeah, but I'm an
Yeah.
investor and a miner, so it's just a little shocking that I haven't heard any of this stuff. So
Yeah. So yeah, Gaju Express came out from an experiment 2 weeks ago, and this is all picked up really quick. I was hoping actually to release it yesterday, and then I got into this the transport protocol thing and realized that generalizes to actually solve the DNS and TLS problem, and I'm like, whoa. So communication, like I guess so far I haven't felt like I had much to communicate about until like just now. So, and again, I'm not the best at it, so we need to do write-ups and explain these. The proposition with Gaja Express is, why should I buy well, how can I securely send a file? Use Gaja Express. How do I get Gajus to pay for that? Get a mining license is a pretty easy path to that. For like a law firm or whatever. Um, but I need to explain that proposition. I need to do some writing about it, and I'm still writing the code, and I'm kind of trying to split my time between the two. That's been a big. I don't. I guess the problem is with a genuinely new thing that no one's ever done before. I can't say this is like X but Y. Um, the process of like I had no idea that the transport tunnel that I was going to use for this generalizes so well to solve a huge problem in like general computing. That was not obvious at all until like 2 days ago. So this is when it comes to like the bleeding edge. This is like the hourly bleeding edge, and it's very hard to articulate those until I have a thing that works that I can show you and say, try this out, and then make an announcement and then go for it. So that's that's kind of stymieing my efforts to communicate like more publicly about these, and we'll try to well we're going to try to do better with that, and thank goodness our sites are finally coming along. Our proposition is being expressed publicly on our websites a little bit more coherently, and also when we write articles, we're aware that most humans don't go read stuff because people don't read. They ask AI for a summary, right? And what's been happening is that because we handwrite all of our articles and we do use kind of our own lingo internally for a lot of these things, what's happening is that the AI finds our site, and we wind up having or our different sites, including my personal one that points to a lot of our company stuff. We have a very high perplexity score. So what a perplexity score is when an AI reads an article, it's scanning the internet for training data. And it goes, oh, something I haven't seen before. I'm going to read this. So the AI is reading it. Now, as it's reading it, it's trying to predict what the next word is, as if it was writing it. And if the next word is the same next word that it would have put up, it has a probability score for each next word. It goes, that's low perplexity. I would have written this. And so an AI can detect whether or not it or a similar model wrote the thing it's reading with a very high degree of accuracy. Now, when it comes to our site, it can't predict fucking anything that we write about. And it goes, wow, this is very high perplexity. I should really focus on this and try to form a contextual model of what this topic is, because I never would have come up with this. Now that is getting us very quickly into the kind of an untrained AI model will have a fairly good picture of Gajumaru at this point because of how much stuff we put out that's a little bit deeper on the technical side. Now, bringing that forward, I need to spend probably like as soon as I get Gaju Express in a working state and can push it to you guys so that your next version of Gaju Desk has it, I need to spend probably 3 or 4 days just writing blog articles and how-tos and, maybe do some videos and try to put some information out about what this is, how to use it, what's the underlying bits. And again, I know humans aren't going to go read the manual, but the AI will. So that's kind of how that's the new SEO, right? SEO's dead. People don't care. People just ask, Gemini or Grok or whatever, hey, Grok, how does this, what's the Gajumaru? And it'll tell them what they believe is a summary. So the higher perplexity we are in our materials, the more accurate the AI models get describing us. That's been a funny process to kind of watch happen. So Cecile and I've been sort of tracking that as we go. But you have to write it with yourself. You can't get high perplexity output from an AI model by definition. So we just have to spend time to actually type stuff out. Unfortunately, that takes days though. It takes a couple days to do that. And so what happens to your programming week? Well, you don't have a programming week this week. You just have a typing stuff out week. And that is a quarter of your month, right? And that costs money. And so we have to, so why are we charging for mining licenses? Well, to pay for that week, that's kind of the unfortunate reality. Cause there's no angel investor who's like knee deep in Ethereum is going to come and fund us, right? They're like, oh, you're you're a shit coin, and they don't understand. Like, dude, we're trying to just sell shoes online. We're trying to solve that problem first, and all this other stuff flows out of that. That's a concrete value, not some ephemeral number go up thing, and that's not a popular message right now. So it's not a popular message with like the astronaut, the financial astronauts. It's a very popular message with normal people who are like trying to run a business or have kids or whatever, right? That's a whole different mindset.
Right.
So
No, I love the fact that you guys are focused on the utility aspect of this and not just the coin. That's what attracted to me to this. And I thought this was great. It was good to hear people and where they are in the knowledge curve of this. So some great questions.
yeah, it's a really interesting group. And it's nice. It's also nice to like have a group that's actually thought about this stuff. This is not the number grow up spastic crowd, right? And
Right.
that's really nice. Having also like our initial miners, right? We have like tons of small business owners, and they actually have those concrete questions like, "Oh, cool, how can I use this in my business?" And so every time they say something like that, or they say, "I've got this problem, can this be applied to that?" You wind up with these novel use cases that you would never get from the crypto people, and they're like concrete uses. And that's utility value. Like that's everything about utility value discovery that you can't do with like, you can hire the big crypto consulting firms. They won't tell you about this stuff. They'll be like, oh, well, monkeys was so last year. This time it's going to be wolves. So we'll have wolf NFTs. It's like, that's dumb, dude.
Well,
Okay,
it's
guys.
funny
So,
being a finance nerd. Just the transparency of the Chain Explorer, I thought was really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Just to be able to see that, and I had some basic questions about that, but it's embarrassing.
No, go ahead.
No, it's for another time. But it's just kind of
Okay,
some of the
okay.
functionality and just kind of
So on that note, by the way, so Dimitar wrote that out, like really quick just to get an Explorer up that was kind of bare bones. And it turned out being like kind of bare bones is like a good instinct. I think I kind of like how that one works the most. Um, the back end of it is this middleware thing that we've had around. It was like kind of a wobbly project. It's hard to debug. And Ulf has come up with like this really cool tiny little plugin that you just put inside of a node and it adds new indices. So it crawls the chain from the genesis up to the current height and it puts all these indexes like every transaction that's happened from this account, point to those from this index. Every
okay.
contract call that's come in, point to that from this index and so on. The reason you can't do that from just the normal chain is that the chain has like every transaction that's happened, but it doesn't have a my ID points to all the transactions I've had in the past, right? Because that's other transaction hashes. So it's missing those indices to be lean. To make those fast, those lookups fast, you need an index that points to all these things. And Ulf came up with a teeny tiny plugin that adds these indices, and you can crawl a chain up, and we're going to rewrite the Explorer against that. And it's like, it's way smaller, it's way leaner, it's way faster. It's just the right way to do it. And of course, Ulf would have come up with that. Nobody like, we need a middleware. It's going to be this big, huge thing. Like, no, Ulf's like, we could just do a little plugin, add some more indices. And oh, that was nice. Moving on. And it's like, for Ulf, he's like, yeah, just moving on. And Dimitar's like, whoa, you just solved this huge problem. Ah. So he needs to rewrite the Explorer against that plugin. But the indexing plugin is like super cool. The plugin architecture for Gajumaru, if you're an Erlang programmer, you can write a plugin for Gajumaru that launches with the node and runs inside the context of the node. So you can watch all the chain events happen and you can initiate network calls outside of that. So not just a thing that happened inside of the chain, but you can initiate a real world action outside of it and say, hey, that thing you were waiting for, it just happened, pew, and send you a message. That's what I want to do behind Gajumarket so that the Gajumarket website and the chain itself can never get out of sync. Because currently, like, transactions go through the site and they go to the chain, and because the site submitted the transaction to the chain, it knows what it's waiting for, right? So it's a pending transaction from its perspective. But if you nowadays, so in the past that was fine because making a contract call on any chain is like impossible. The tooling's too hard. Nobody knows how to do it. Now, anybody could just open GajuDesk and get like one of those contract addresses from Gajumarket and open the Gajumarket contract and just call it themselves, totally forgetting the website, and just call it through GajuDesk if they wanted to, the Gajumarket website wouldn't know that that happened because it happened out of band. It didn't go through the website to the chain. It went from someone's GajuDesk instance just straight to the chain, and this guy never heard about it, right? So you could have like a price update. So the cached web page that you see says this is 10 Gajus, but maybe the vendor just in GajuDesk changed his price with a naked contract call straight to the chain, and the site never heard about it. So it still says 10 Gajus here, but it's 5 Gajus on chain. So keeping the chain and a service based on the chain in sync is actually a very hard problem. It's not really solved well, like basically anywhere. The only reason that it works right now in other chain projects is that it's too hard to do a contract call like that. We've made it really easy, but in making it easy, we've opened ourselves up to this thing where people can just, oh shit, they can make contract calls now. Like anybody can. So in making that easy, we've opened ourselves up to this problem that keeping a service that's backed by the chain in sync with the chain is actually a hard problem. And once again, Ulf is like, oh, we can make a plugin thing where you could just make any plugin and you could just tell the plugin to do whatever you want. And so once again, for him, this was like an obvious thing. And now I'm really happy that that's there. So I need to make a plugin for the chain that notifies Gajumarket of an update. And then I'm going to put Gajumarket out like the mainnet one publicly with like real Gajus. There's a testnet one up right now, but it has that sync vulnerability. So I want to make the mainnet one. I want to have it definitely have that sync problem fixed before I put it out publicly. Because it's easy, because like on Gajumarket, it shows the contract addresses of each sales item. So it's easy. It's like not hard for anyone to figure out how to call it by themselves. And someone's going to experiment and try it with GajuDesk, right? Innocent experiment. Someone will innocently be experimenting and they'll get the sales site out of sync with the chain. And that would be awful. So that needs to be fixed, but it's a tractable problem. I understand the problem. It's not hard to fix. I just haven't had time to do it yet. But once that's done, I'll put Gajumarket out, and then I'll probably start drop shipping stuff from Japan through it because I can. Anybody can. That's the fun thing about Gajumarket. So anyway, that's long conversation, circuitous conversation to get back to what you were talking about. But anyway, all these things are about real concrete value.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any questions? I think we're gonna have to wrap this up, but I think we should also do this with a bit more regularity, like I don't know, every 2 weeks or something, because we're also coming up with we have launches coming up.
Yeah,
So we do need some like insights from people from different industries, and also I don't know, like launch strategies, because we've been trying to figure things out, how to launch GajuPay and all sorts of stuff. But yeah, we'll be coming up with some new websites for the new products and some web pages to explain what those are. Maybe we can do this like every 2 weeks or something, right? I think this has been fun and very informative.
Yeah,
thank you
thanks for
guys
good
so much for
questions.
coming. Yeah.
Thank you. One last question is where do you find the faucet Gaju test?
Oh yeah, let me it in that blog post I linked it. Let me get the
Oh, it's in there. Okay.
It is, but I'll put the URL up here for you real quick. The testnet faucet is that's the recording screen. You guys are actually over here. Hang on. I keep doing that. I keep clicking like OBS when I'm so it's faucet.testnet.gajumaru.io, which is quite a long URL, but yeah, that's it.
Thank you. I feel like Revu's gonna go learn Sophia and make us a gambling.
They might. That's
No, I want to be able to explain Gajumaru better. It's like I've been in other areas so far in crypto, but I've been looking for a project like Gajumaru, and it's just really hard to understand at the start because you have to shift through so many things, and the information is really spread, and then you have this long, like 2-hour videos from 7 months ago on YouTube and stuff like this. So it was hard to get into, but as soon as you understand it, it clicks. It's like really exciting, honestly.
Mhm.
It's just to understand this in easy concepts and put those things together in a way that other the crypto bros, like I used to be, basically understand it and understand what the difference is between Gajumaru and all of the other blockchains. If you can manage to do that, I think everything will start to roll naturally.
Well,
Yeah, we're working on those materials, by the way, and thank you for your suggestion. You listed like some materials that you think would be really helpful. We did take note, and we're going to be working on all of that.
yeah, I'm going to continue to write a couple of tutorials, and I haven't, once again, I'm not good at articulating things the first time. I need to try a few iterations at like introduction to blockchain via Gajumaru. You want to go do stuff on Ethereum, whatever. Come learn blockchain here. And the reason I want to do it that way is JavaScript is a notoriously horrible language. It's terrible. But why does a whole generation know just that and nothing else? It's because Microsoft made the boneheaded decision to not include any compiler with your computer when you bought a Windows PC. Because they're clowns. They're like, we're going to control everything. Okay, well, when they did that, they sold people computers with no ability to program those computers. And Microsoft's thinking was, if we give them compilers, they might write their own programs and they won't buy our programs. Well, what happened was, over time, eventually somebody said, oh, everybody has a browser. It'd be cool if we could script web pages. So we'll include a language that was spec'd in one weekend as a sort of floating the idea project. It was never supposed to be a main language. This guy wrote out JavaScript, pushed it out. It was like, it's a comically silly language, very short-sighted how it's defined. But that now became the only language everybody had. Everybody, no matter what computer system you're using, you had access to JavaScript. So when a kid comes along and says, hey, how can I learn how to program? People said, oh, well, hit F12 and you'll get this little thing and open the console and just type a hello world thing. Everybody had access to that. Everybody did. So there's a whole generation of programmers who never learned how computers work at all. And they learned how to program inside of their browser. And now the web is everything. That's what happened. So the idea was learn how to program in your browser and then go do real stuff, right? That was the idea. Get your feet wet over here because you've got access to it. And then if you do like programming, you can spend money, get a real compiler, get a real computer, do stuff, right? What happened was everybody just stayed with what they knew and wrote everything into the web. And now we're in this room, right? So we can kind of do the same thing with adoption and say, how can I learn blockchain? Well, just get GajuDesk. It's free. Go get some testnet Gajus and just start writing. Just play with the idea. Like, what are you doing with it? What's the network call interface look like? And just kind of get around some of the basics. You can write a web page that will send JavaScript requests to a Gajumaru node, and it'll get JSON responses back, which JavaScript can interpret. Then you can just start writing out a little web page right there. You can just write a contract and send it out and figure out how this works. Making it a lightweight process and then say, okay, now you know how this works. Go off and play with Ethereum. And what'll happen is they're going to go look at Ethereum and go, what the fuck? No, I'm going back to Gajumaru. This sucks. So we have that much of a competitive advantage in terms of simplicity. So I'm absolutely confident telling people, yeah, you want to do Ethereum shit? Awesome. You do Solana? Cool. Come over to Gajumaru, learn how to do blockchain where it's easy. And then you can go do the big boy stuff. And then they'll go look at the big boy stuff and be like, this is all fake shit. What the hell? Why would I do anything over here? And come back. So I'm very comfortable with making that play as an adoption play. Because if you've ever touched the other stuff, it's bad. So that, anyway, I think we have a big competitive advantage there with our tooling. I also did not know, I wrote Fate Weaver not realizing it was going to become a killer feature within our own team. Dimitar pestered me endlessly when like we had some changes in back-end libraries and things broke. And then he's like, oh my God, I can't use GajuDesk to call contracts anymore. And I was like, someone's using that? Like, I didn't really think about it. But that turns out that was like a killer feature. Same thing with having contract source on chain. All these things that we've done as conveniences for ourselves have turned out to be we've solved the sticking points for for developer side blockchain adoption. So, well, that's been a nice outcome. it's very hard to explain to the outside in like a marketing sense. It's hard to explain why that's important to investors. But it's basically the story of why JavaScript took over the programming world is the same story of like how our tooling wound up sort of infecting our own team with convenience. And that's a good adoption lever. I don't know how to exploit it just yet, but I'm going to start writing tutorials and blogs and try to keep that going.
Okay. Yeah, I guess we need to wrap this up. Thank you guys for coming, and I'll post when we're having the next one. All right.
Good.
Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.
Thank you.
All right.
Bye.